Have you ever been judged unfairly in the first 10 seconds of meeting someone, judged not for your character, but for the color of your skin or the clothes on your back? What happens when a simple piece of paper, an airline ticket, becomes the focal point for a storm of prejudice? This is the story of Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose quiet brilliance was underestimated one fateful Tuesday on transatlantic flight 284. A condescending laugh from a flight attendant set in motion a chain of events that no one saw coming, a devastating reckoning that would not only change lives, but shake a billion-dollar corporation to its very core. The air in London's Heathrow Airport was a familiar symphony of chaos. The rolling thunder of suitcases on polished floors, the polyglot murmur of 1,000 conversations, the distant, almost melancholic chime announcing a final boarding call for a flight to Dubai. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, it was just background noise, a soundscape she had become accustomed to over the past 5 years. She sat nursing a lukewarm Earl Grey tea, the steam ghosting against the weary lines around her eyes. She was dressed for comfort, not for conquest, a simple, well-worn pair of dark denim jeans, a soft heather grey cashmere sweater, and a pair of comfortable but stylish Allbirds were her uniform for the grueling 10-hour flight back to San Francisco. Her hair was pulled back in a neat, intricate braid that cascaded down her back, a style that was both practical and elegant. To the casual observer, she was just another traveler, perhaps a student or a young professional returning from a European holiday. No one would guess she had just spent the last 72 hours in a high-stakes battle of wits, securing a $150 million Series C funding round for her company. Etheria Innovations wasn't just a company. It was her life's work. Born from her doctoral thesis at Stanford, Etheria developed AI-driven agricultural solutions using satellite imagery and machine learning to help farms in developing nations drastically increase crop yields while minimizing water usage. It was revolutionary, world-changing work, and at just 32 years old, Evelyn was its CEO and driving force. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her reverie. It was a message from Marcus Thorne, her COO and mentor, already settled in the first-class lounge. Marcus: "They have vintage Dom Perignon here. Sure, I can't tempt you to use that upgrade voucher. You've more than earned it." Evelyn smiled faintly. She typed back a reply. "Evelyn tempting. But I'm good. The team is in Economy Plus. I'll fly back with them. Besides, you know I can't sleep in those lie-flat beds. Too much space." It was true. She preferred the coziness, the sense of being cocooned. But more than that, she believed in leadership from the trenches. Her team of 4 brilliant engineers had been with her in London, working tirelessly alongside her. They were celebrating with beers at a pub near the gate. She had opted for a few moments of quiet solitude before the long journey home. The victory was immense, but it had left her drained, bone-deep tired. All she wanted was her window seat, her noise-cancelling headphones, and the soothing drone of the Rolls-Royce Trent engines to lull her to sleep. She checked her boarding pass again on her phone. Seat 12A Economy Plus. A window seat at the bulkhead. Perfect. Plenty of legroom without the ostentation of the front cabin. She had booked it herself weeks ago. The rest of her team was in the same row and the one behind it. The chime for her flight, TA-284 to San Francisco, finally echoed through Terminal 5. Evelyn gathered her things, a worn leather backpack containing her laptop, a bundle of technical papers, and a well-loved paperback novel. She slung it over her shoulder, the weight a familiar comfort. As she joined the queue for Priority Group 2, she felt a familiar pang of anxiety mixed with anticipation. The anxiety of being enclosed in a metal tube for half a day, and the anticipation of seeing the golden California coastline emerge from the clouds. She was ready to go home. She scanned the gate agents, the uniformed crew of Transatlantic Airways. They looked efficient, professional. One of them, a senior flight attendant with sharp, angular features and hair pulled back into a severe blonde bun, was directing passengers with a clipped, authoritative tone. Her name tag read, Brenda. Evelyn didn't think much of it. She was just another face in the blur of travel, another person doing their job. She had no idea that in less than 20 minutes, this woman would set a course for a collision that would make the turbulence over the Atlantic feel like a gentle breeze. The jet bridge was cool and sterile, a metallic umbilical cord connecting the bustling terminal to the quiet promise of the Boeing 780 Dreamliner. Evelyn felt the subtle shift in atmosphere as she stepped onto the aircraft, the scent of filtered air and disinfectant, a familiar welcome. "Good afternoon. Welcome aboard," a young, bright-eyed flight attendant greeted her at the door. Evelyn returned the smile with a nod and made her way down the aisle, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The cabin was already filling up a mosaic of travelers finding their places. She located her row 12, the first row of the Economy Plus cabin, just behind the business class curtain. As she paused to let a family settle in across the aisle, the senior flight attendant from the gate, Brenda Miller, moved into the galley in front of her. She was rearranging coffee pots with a clatter, her movements sharp and impatient. When Evelyn moved towards her seat, 12A, she had to pass Brenda. "Excuse me," she said politely. Brenda turned her eyes, doing a swift, dismissive scan of Evelyn's appearance, from the casual sneakers to the simple sweater to the dark braided hair. It was a look Evelyn had seen 1,000 times before. The look that assessed, categorized and judged her in a fraction of a second. A faint, almost imperceptible sneer tugged at the corner of Brenda's lips. "Can I help you?" Brenda's voice was laced with a saccharine sweetness that failed to mask an undercurrent of condescension. "Just getting to my seat," Evelyn replied calmly, holding up her phone with the boarding pass displayed. 12A. Brenda glanced at the phone, and then a sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a short, sharp, derisive laugh, a puff of air that conveyed disbelief and amusement in equal measure. "Oh, honey," Brenda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a joke. "I think you might be a little lost. This is the Economy Plus cabin. Your seat is probably further back." The world seemed to narrow to the few feet of space between them. The low hum of the cabin, the chatter of passengers, it all faded away. Evelyn felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, a mixture of anger and profound weariness. She had battled institutional bias in academia and fought off venture capitalists who told her she didn't fit the mold of a CEO. She thought naively, perhaps, that she wouldn't have to fight this battle just to sit in a seat she had paid for. "I'm aware of where I am," Evelyn said, her voice steady and even betraying none of the turmoil inside. "My ticket is for seat 12A. Brenda's smile didn't falter. It widened. "Right. Look, mistakes happen. Let me see that." She took the phone from Evelyn's unresisting hand, holding it up to the light as if it were a complex foreign object. She squinted at the screen. A bulkhead window seat. "These are very popular. Are you sure this is your ticket?" The insinuation was as clear as it was ugly. "Yes, I'm quite sure," Evelyn said, her patience wearing thin. "I booked it myself." "Well, it's just..." "Sometimes people get confused," Brenda continued, handing the phone back. "Perhaps you're traveling with someone who booked it for you. Maybe you should check with them. The main economy cabin is just a bit further down the aisle." Every word was a carefully placed needle. "Sweetie," "Honey," "Confused." Each one was designed to diminish, to infantilize. A younger flight attendant, a man named David with a kind face and dark hair, had noticed the exchange from the galley. He stepped forward, a concerned look on his face. "Is there a problem, Brenda?" he asked, his eyes darting between his senior colleague and Evelyn. "No problem at all," David Brenda chirped, turning her back to Evelyn as if she were a piece of furniture. "Just helping this young lady find her correct seat." She then turned back to Evelyn, her voice hardening slightly. "Look, miss, I have a full flight to board. I don't have time for games. If you don't have a valid boarding pass for this section, I'm going to have to ask you to move along." The accusation was now explicit. Evelyn's ticket was not valid. She was an interloper. A fraud. The passengers nearby were starting to stare, their curiosity piqued by the low-level drama unfolding in the aisle. Evelyn took a slow, deep breath, centering herself. She had learned long ago that reacting with overt anger was a losing game. It was what they expected, what they wanted. It would allow them to paint her as aggressive as the problem. "There is no confusion," Evelyn stated, her voice now carrying a new authority that made Brenda pause. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. That is my name on the ticket. That is my seat, 12A. I am not moving further back. I would appreciate it if you would step aside so I can take my seat and we can all get on with our day." The use of her title doctor seemed to irritate Brenda more than impress her. The sneer returned more pronounced this time. Dr. Brenda scoffed, drawing the word out. "A doctor of what creative writing? Look, I don't know how you got this boarding pass, but there is no need to get feisty. I'm the senior attendant on this flight, and I am telling you that you are in the wrong place. Now are you going to move, or am I going to have to call the ground staff to escort you?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Being escorted off the plane, the humiliation, the injustice. It was the ultimate power play. Evelyn looked past Brenda's smug face and saw her team members watching, their expressions a mixture of shock and anger. One of them, a young programmer named Liam, started to stand up, but Evelyn gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Not yet. Not like this." She knew this had crossed a line. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act of prejudice and harassment, and it required a response that was as deliberate and as impactful as the offense itself. "That won't be necessary," Evelyn said, her voice now dangerously quiet. She pulled her phone back out, but she didn't open the airline app. She opened her call log. "You're right. You are the senior flight attendant, which means you must be aware of the new corporate travel contracts your airline signs, specifically the high-value ones." Brenda's condescending smile flickered for the first time. A sliver of uncertainty pierced through her armor of self-righteousness. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," Evelyn said, pressing a number on her phone. "Transatlantic Airways just signed an exclusive multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract last month to become the sole carrier for a rapidly expanding tech firm based in San Francisco. A company called Etheria Innovations." She put the phone to her ear. It rang once. You see, Evelyn continued, her eyes locked on Brenda's. "I know about it because I'm the one who signed it, and I am the one who can break it." The phone in Evelyn's hand was answered on the second ring. "Marcus, it's Evelyn. I need you to come back to seat 12A for a moment. There seems to be a customer service issue." Brenda Miller watched her face, a mask of confusion. The name Etheria Innovations had snagged on something in her memory. There had been a flurry of internal memos about a new platinum-tier corporate account, chatter about a big win for the sales department. But the woman standing in front of her in her simple jeans and sweater couldn't possibly be connected to that. It was a bluff. It had to be. "I don't have time for this," Brenda snapped, her voice a little too loud. I'm calling security. She reached for the interphone on the wall. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a deep voice said from behind her. Brenda turned. A tall, impeccably dressed man was striding down the aisle from the first-class cabin. He wore a tailored Italian suit, a crisp white shirt, and a watch that probably cost more than Brenda's car. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal authority. It was Marcus Thorne, COO of Etheria Innovations. He stopped beside Evelyn, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He didn't even glance at Brenda initially. His focus was entirely on his CEO. "Evelyn, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Just a misunderstanding about my seat," she said, the understatement hanging in the air. Marcus then turned his cool, analytical gaze to Brenda. His eyes were like ice. "Is there a problem with Dr. Reed's ticket?" Brenda was flustered. The sudden appearance of this powerful-looking man from the front of the plane had completely thrown her off balance. So this passenger was creating a disturbance. "She's in a seat that she paid for." Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously smooth. "The seat that was booked as part of the Etheria Innovations corporate account. The very same account that is projected to net this airline over $8 million in its first year alone. Is that the seat we're talking about?" Each question was a hammer blow, systematically demolishing Brenda's reality. The color drained from her face. The name, the account, the man in the suit. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed. She looked from Marcus's stern face back to Evelyn's calm, unreadable expression. The woman in the casual clothes, Dr. Evelyn Reed, CEO. The blood rushed to Brenda's ears. It was her, the CEO from the memo, the one who had been featured in a recent issue of Forbes magazine, a copy of which was probably sitting in the first-class cabin at that very moment. A nauseating wave of dread washed over her. The laugh. Oh, honey. The condescending tone. The threat to call security. It all replayed in her mind, each memory a fresh stab of panic. I see, Brenda stammered, her professional veneer cracking to reveal raw fear. There's been a terrible mistake. A mistake." Marcus echoed, his eyebrows rising. "It looked quite deliberate from where I was standing. My entire engineering team is sitting right there." He gestured to Evelyn's colleagues, who were now all watching intently. "They witnessed you laugh at my CEO's boarding pass and accuse her of not belonging here. Tell me, Brenda, is this standard procedure for transatlantic airways, platinum-tier clients?" The use of her name plucked from her tag and wielded like a weapon made her flinch. David, the other flight attendant, stepped forward again, his face pale. "Brenda, maybe you should just—" "Stay out of this, David," she hissed before turning her attention back to Evelyn, her entire demeanor transforming in a split second. The sneer was gone, replaced by a desperate, fawning smile that didn't reach her terrified eyes. "Dr. Reed, I am so sorry. I can't apologize enough. I completely misread the situation. It's been a long day. She trailed off, realizing how pathetic her excuses sounded. "Please allow me to rectify this. We have an open seat in first class right next to Mr. Thorne. Let me escort you up there immediately. The champagne is already chilled." She reached for Evelyn's backpack, trying to be helpful, but Evelyn took a step back out of her reach. The rejection was quiet, but absolute. "No, thank you," Evelyn said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I am perfectly happy with the seat I chose, the seat I paid for. 12A. The refusal was worse than any shouting match would have been. It was a cold, final judgment. Brenda's offer of a peace offering a first-class seat was brushed aside as if it were nothing. Because to Evelyn it was nothing. The issue had never been about the class of the seat. It was about the respect she was owed as a human being and a paying customer. But Dr. Reed, please. Brenda pleaded, her voice cracking. Let me at least get you a drink before takeoff. Anything you want. It's on the house. I'm fine, Evelyn repeated. She turned to Marcus. Thank you, Marcus. I can handle it from here. Marcus nodded, giving Brenda one last, withering look before turning and walking back towards the front of the plane, his purpose served. Defeated, Brenda shrunk back, mumbling another apology before practically fleeing into the galley. The curtain between the cabins swished shut, leaving Evelyn standing in the aisle. The other passengers who had been shamelessly eavesdropping quickly averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by the safety card in their seat-back pockets. Evelyn finally slid into her window seat, the soft leather cool against her skin. She buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window at the ground crew moving about on the tarmac below. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep, profound exhaustion. The victory in the London boardroom felt 1,000,000 miles away. She had just wanted a quiet flight home. Instead, she had been forced to unsheathe her sword to reveal her title and her power, not to celebrate an achievement, but simply to be treated with a baseline level of human dignity. And as the aircraft finally began its slow pushback from the gate, she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was far from over. The flight to San Francisco is approximately 10 hours and 30 minutes. For Brenda Miller, it was a lifetime. After the confrontation, she remained hidden in the galley for as long as she could, her hands shaking as she tried to busy herself with service preparations. Her mind was a maelstrom of panic. CEO. Multi-million-dollar contract. Marcus Thorne. The names echoed in her head. She had worked for Transatlantic for 22 years. She had survived airline mergers, bankruptcies, and global pandemics. She was 3 years from retirement, with a pension she was counting on. In the space of 5 minutes, she had jeopardized it all with a single contemptuous laugh. Her colleague David approached her cautiously. Brenda, are you okay? Do I look okay? She snapped, her voice trembling. Did you see his face? That man, he looked like he could have me fired before we even land. What you said was... Pretty bad, David admitted, not unkindly. Why would you even go there? I don't know. She cried, her voice a strained whisper. I looked at her, and I made an assumption. A stupid, stupid assumption. I've got to fix this. Fueled by a new wave of desperate energy, Brenda emerged from the galley. She would win Dr. Reed over. She would apologize so profusely, pamper her so excessively, that this whole incident would be forgotten, chalked up to a bad day. She approached row 12, a practiced, warm smile plastered on her face. Evelyn was looking out the window, her headphones on, but she wasn't listening to music. She was simply trying to create a barrier between herself and the world. Dr. Reed Brenda began, her voice soft. Evelyn slowly turned her head, her expression neutral. She didn't remove her headphones. Dr. Reed, I just want to apologize again from the bottom of my heart. My behavior was inexcusable and not representative of the values of Transatlantic Airways. Brenda recited the words, sounding hollow and rehearsed. To show you how truly sorry we are, I've personally opened a bottle of the vintage champagne from first class just for you. Could I pour you a glass to enjoy before takeoff? Evelyn simply raised a hand, a clear gesture of refusal. She shook her head once, then turned back to the window. The dismissal was absolute. Brenda stood there for a moment, holding the invisible bottle of champagne, her smile faltering. Passengers were watching again. The humiliation was a physical burn. She retreated. A few minutes later, after the seatbelt sign had been switched off, she returned. Dr. Reed, I have a complimentary amenities kit from our first-class cabin for you. It has some lovely skincare products, pajamas. Evelyn didn't even turn around this time. She just kept her gaze fixed on the endless blue of the sky outside. Brenda's desperation began to curdle into a sour mix of fear and resentment. Fine. Be that way. She couldn't force the woman to accept her apologies. She instructed David to handle all service for rows 12 and 13 for the remainder of the flight. She couldn't bear to face those cold, judging eyes again. For Evelyn, the flight was a blur of conflicted emotions. The initial anger had subsided, replaced by a cold resolve. This wasn't just about Brenda. Brenda was a symptom of a larger disease, the casual baked-in prejudice that she and so many others faced every single day, the constant need to be twice as good, twice as accomplished, just to be seen as equal. Refusing the champagne and the amenities kit wasn't about punishing Brenda. It was about refusing to let the incident be smoothed over with cheap trinkets. It was about principle. Across the aisle, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins, a journalism student from UC Berkeley, had watched the entire exchange unfold. She had discreetly filmed the initial confrontation on her phone, horrified by the flight attendant's overt racism. She saw the arrival of the man in the suit, saw the color drain from Brenda's face. She now watched as the same flight attendant repeatedly tried and failed to apologize. She knew this was a story. It was more than a story. It was a perfect contained example of the power dynamics she wrote about in her college paper. As the flight wore on, the tension was a palpable entity in the cabin. The flight crew whispered amongst themselves in the galleys. David served Evelyn and her team with a quiet, respectful efficiency, his face etched with embarrassment for his colleagues' actions. Brenda, meanwhile, went about her other duties with a brittle, robotic cheerfulness, but her eyes were haunted. Every smile was forced. Every "enjoy your meal" sounded like a plea. Evelyn didn't sleep. She opened her laptop and began to write. She wasn't writing code, nor was she reviewing financial projections. She was composing an email. It was addressed to Richard Sterling, the Executive Vice President of In-Flight Services for Transatlantic Airways. She knew his name because it was on the signature block of the welcome letter for their new corporate account. The email was calm, precise, and devastating. She detailed the incident without emotion or hyperbole, simply stating the facts. She recounted Brenda Miller's words, her laugh, her accusations, and her threats. She mentioned that her COO, Marcus Thorne, and her entire engineering team were witnesses. She concluded not with a demand for compensation or an upgrade, but with a single, chilling sentence. Given this experience, which suggests a deep-seated cultural issue within your crew, we at Etheria Innovations will be forced to immediately suspend our new partnership and review all legal options for breach of the service level agreements outlined in our contract, pending a satisfactory and systemic resolution to this matter. She attached Sarah Jenkins's name and seat number as a third-party witness, having discreetly gotten the information from the observant student. Then, using the plane's sluggish satellite Wi-Fi, she hit send. The email disappeared into the digital ether, a time bomb set to detonate the moment the plane's wheels touched down in San Francisco. The descent into San Francisco was beautiful. The late afternoon sun cast the Golden Gate Bridge in a fiery orange glow, and the familiar hills of the Bay Area rose up to greet them. For the first time in hours, Evelyn felt a flicker of relief. She was almost home. As the Boeing 787 taxied towards the gate at SFO's international terminal, the cabin came alive with the usual post-flight ritual of passengers gathering their belongings. Brenda Miller's voice came over the intercom, reciting the scripted arrival announcement. Her tone was strained, the practiced cheerfulness of her voice cracking under the immense pressure. She avoided eye contact with anyone in row 12 as she walked the aisle for the final safety checks. When the plane finally docked and the seatbelt sign pinged off, there was a collective sigh of relief. But as the door was opened, instead of the usual ground staff, two figures stepped onto the aircraft. One was a harried-looking gate agent. The other was a tall man in a sharp, dark grey suit with silver hair and a grim, thunderous expression. Evelyn recognized him instantly from his corporate photo. It was Richard Sterling, the executive vice president. He had clearly received her email and had driven straight to the airport to intercept the flight. "Hold all passengers for a moment, please." Sterling's voice boomed through the quiet cabin, cutting through the chatter. He scanned the flight attendants, his eyes locking onto Brenda. "Brenda Miller," he said, his voice cold as steel. A word. "Now." A collective gasp went through the crew. Brenda, who had been forcing a smile near the exit, froze. The color, which had slowly been returning to her face over the last few hours, drained away completely, leaving her looking pale and ill. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered. I wasn't expecting. I'm sure you weren't," he cut her off, curtly. "On the jet bridge." He stepped back to let her pass. Brenda walked as if in a trance, her legs unsteady. The moment she was off the aircraft, Sterling turned to the other crew members. "Purser, you're in charge. Get these passengers deplaned. David Chen. I need a statement from you in the crew office in 30 minutes. David nodded, his face grim. Sterling then looked down the aisle, and his eyes found Evelyn. He walked towards her, his expression softening from anger to one of deep professional concern. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice now much quieter and more respectful. "I am Richard Sterling. I cannot begin to express how appalled I am. I received your email about an hour ago, and came here immediately. On behalf of the entire executive team at Transatlantic Airways, I offer you our most sincere and unreserved apology." Evelyn simply nodded, accepting the apology, but offering no words of comfort. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Sterling. Your treatment was unacceptable, and I give you my personal assurance that it will be dealt with in the swiftest and most decisive manner possible," he continued. "Is there anything at all we can do for you right now? Transportation, luggage assistance?" "No, thank you," Evelyn said. "My team and I will be fine." Her calm demeanor seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst would have. He nodded stiffly. "Of course. I will be in touch with your office first thing tomorrow morning to discuss this further." As Evelyn and her team finally deplaned, they saw the scene unfolding on the jet bridge. Richard Sterling was speaking to Brenda in low, furious tones. Brenda was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded, her hands clasped in front of her. 22 years, Richard. 22 years of service. It was a mistake, they heard her say. Sterling's response was merciless. "A mistake is forgetting to offer someone a refill on their coffee, Brenda. What you did was an act of blatant prejudice that has just put an $8 million contract in jeopardy and disgraced this airline. Hand me your badge and your wings. You are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Don't even bother coming to the office. We'll mail you your personal effects." Brenda seemed to collapse in on herself, a sob racking her body. A member of the airport staff gently guided her away, no longer an employee, just a civilian in a uniform she no longer had the right to wear. As Evelyn walked past, she didn't feel a shred of pity. Nor did she feel joy. She just felt a grim sense of finality. This was the consequence. The first domino had fallen. But as she entered the main terminal, she saw something that told her the story was about to get much, much bigger. Sarah Jenkins, the journalism student, was standing off to the side, talking animatedly on her phone. and as Evelyn walked by, she heard a few key phrases. "Unbelievable, I have the whole thing on video. I'm sending the file to you now. Yes, for the Associated Press, the hard karma for Brenda Miller was just the beginning." The real storm was about to break. By the time Evelyn Reed woke up the next morning, the story was everywhere. Sarah Jenkins's video, a surprisingly stable 45-second clip of the initial confrontation, had been picked up by the Associated Press and distributed globally. The headline was devastatingly simple: "Transatlantic flight attendant fired after harassing." Black CEO accusing her of stealing ticket. The video was brutal. It clearly captured Brenda's condescending laugh, her dismissive honey, and her threat to call security. It also captured Evelyn's unshakable calm and her quiet, dignified responses. The contrast was stark and damning. By 9 a.m. Pacific time, "Let Her Flying While Black" and "Transatlantic Shame" were the top 2 trending topics on X, formerly Twitter. The video had millions of views and was being played on a loop on every major news network from CNN to the BBC. Evelyn's picture was next to Brenda Miller's one, the face of quiet, powerful grace, the other a symbol of corporate prejudice. The fallout was swift and catastrophic for Transatlantic Airways. Their stock price plummeted by 9% in pre-market trading, wiping out over $400 million in shareholder value. Their social media channels were inundated with a tidal wave of outrage. Customers posted about their own negative experiences. Other employees of color shared anonymous stories of a toxic work environment, and thousands of people posted videos of themselves cutting up their transatlantic loyalty cards. For Brenda Miller, life as she knew it was over. Her name, face, and actions were now public domain. She was officially fired that morning via a curt FedEx letter. Journalists were camped outside her modest suburban home. Her social media was flooded with threats. Friends and neighbors suddenly stopped returning her calls. The 22 years of service she had pleaded for were erased. She had become a pariah, a living embodiment of a viral scandal. The narrative that emerged was one of a bitter, entitled woman passed over for promotion who took her frustrations out on those she deemed beneath her. There was a tragic, pathetic truth to it. She was divorced, estranged from her children, and deeply in debt. Her job was the one thing she had left the source of her identity and pride. Her prejudice, born from a lifetime of quiet resentments and biases, had cost her everything. The karma was not just hard, it was absolute. Meanwhile, at the sleek minimalist headquarters of Etheria Innovations in Palo Alto, the atmosphere was electric. The media attention on Evelyn was immense, but she handled it with the same poise she had shown on the plane. She gave one exclusive interview to a respected journalist, using the platform not to vilify Brenda, but to talk about the larger issue. This incident was not about one employee on a bad day. She stated her words broadcast to millions. It's a reflection of systemic biases that we must all work to dismantle. Brenda Miller is a consequence of a corporate culture that allowed her prejudice to go unchecked for over 2 decades. Firing her is not a solution. It's a bandage on a festering wound. Real change requires a painful, honest, and comprehensive overhaul of that culture. Her statement was a masterstroke. It elevated the conversation from one person's downfall to a call for corporate accountability. It also put Transatlantic Airways in an impossible position. Richard Sterling called Evelyn's office 5 times that morning. When he finally got through, his voice was heavy with desperation. "Dr. Reed, Evelyn, you have my word. We are taking this to the highest level. We're launching a full internal review. We will do whatever it takes to make this right." "Whatever it takes" is a vague term, Mr. Sterling. Evelyn replied, her voice calm and businesslike. Marcus Thorne sat opposite her desk, listening on speakerphone, a grimly satisfied look on his face. "We'll offer a public apology, of course, a significant donation to a charity of your choice. We can offer Etheria lifetime platinum status for your entire company, free of charge." Evelyn cut him off. "This isn't about free flights or charitable donations, Richard. This is about the safety and dignity of my employees and all of your passengers. Your company's values are not aligned with ours. As of this morning, I have instructed my legal team to enact the termination clause in our contract, effective immediately." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. The $8 million contract wasn't just in jeopardy anymore. It was gone. For Transatlantic, this was a financial and public relations nightmare of the highest order. They had not only lost a massive new client, but the CEO of that client had just publicly executed them for their moral failings. "Please, Evelyn, don't do this." Sterling pleaded, the desperation raw in his voice. "Give us a chance to fix it. Tell me what you want. Anything." This was the moment Evelyn had been waiting for. The moment of maximum leverage. It was time to stop talking about problems and start implementing solutions. "This is what I want," she said, her voice dropping, filled with the weight of her conviction. "I don't want your apologies. I want your accountability. I want to see a plan, a real actionable plan to change your company from the top down, and I'm going to help you write it." A week later, Dr. Evelyn Reed, accompanied by Marcus Thorne and two of her company's top lawyers, walked into the boardroom at Transatlantic Airways corporate headquarters. The air was thick with tension. On the other side of the vast mahogany table sat the airline's entire C-suite, including the CEO, a man named Gerald Finney, and a visibly humbled Richard Sterling. There were no pleasantries. Evelyn laid a thick binder on the table. "This is our proposal," she announced. "It is non-negotiable." What followed was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. Evelyn, leveraging the full weight of her company's cancelled contract and the immense public pressure on the airline, dictated the terms of Transatlantic's penance. The first condition was the implementation of a mandatory quarterly diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI training program for all 60,000 Transatlantic employees, from baggage handlers to the CEO himself. And it wouldn't be the usual toothless corporate slideshow. The program would be designed and run by a nationally recognized consulting firm that Evelyn had personally vetted, a firm run by black women who specialized in dismantling systemic bias in Fortune 500 companies. Transatlantic would bear the full multi-million-dollar cost. The second condition was the establishment of a new independent civilian oversight board to review all passenger complaints related to discrimination. The board would have the power to recommend disciplinary action up to and including termination, which the airline would be contractually obligated to follow. The third condition was a complete overhaul of their hiring and promotion practices for in-flight crew, with clear, transparent metrics to ensure that leadership roles like senior flight attendant and purser reflected the diversity of the customers they served. And the final condition, the one that made the executives blanch, was that Transatlantic Airways would fund a multi-million-dollar scholarship program administered by Etheria's own charitable foundation to support black and minority students pursuing careers in aviation engineering and business management. You will pay to create the diverse generation of leaders your company so clearly lacks. Evelyn stated, her voice echoing in the silent boardroom. It was a staggering list of demands. It would cost the airline tens of millions of dollars and force a level of transparency and cultural change they had resisted for decades. But they had no choice. To refuse would be corporate suicide. The world was watching. With grim faces, they agreed to every single term. A new contract was drawn up, Not a travel contract, but a contract for corporate reform. Etheria Innovations would not reinstate their business, but they would publicly acknowledge Transatlantic's commitment to change if, and only if, all conditions were met and progress was verified. In the months that followed, the changes began to ripple through the airline. The training was difficult and uncomfortable, forcing employees to confront their own implicit biases. Some, like Brenda, were a lost cause, but many others began to see the world and their passengers through a new lens. The Oversight Board was formed, and for the first time, passenger complaints were treated with the seriousness they deserved. Brenda Miller was never hired by another airline. Her name was too toxic. She lost her home and ended up working a retail job at a mall, a ghost of her former self, forever haunted by a single fateful laugh. Her karma was a harsh, lonely, and permanent descent into obscurity. Evelyn Reed's star, however, only rose higher. Etheria Innovations continued its incredible growth, and she became a powerful and sought-after voice on the topics of ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. She never sought the spotlight, but she used it to champion the causes she believed in. About a year later, Evelyn was boarding another flight. As she handed her boarding pass to the flight attendant at the door, she noticed the woman's name tag, Amelia. Amelia was a young black woman with a warm, genuine smile. She looked at Evelyn's ticket for seat 3A, then looked at Evelyn. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Reed," Amelia said, her eyes shining with respect. "We're honored to have you fly with us today. Can I help you with your bag?" Evelyn smiled back, a real unburdened smile. "Thank you, Amelia. I can manage." As she settled into her seat, she knew the fight was far from over. But looking at Amelia's proud, professional face, she saw a glimmer of the future she was fighting for, a future where respect wasn't a privilege to be earned, but a right to be given freely to everyone. The karma from Flight 284 wasn't just about one woman's downfall. It was about the difficult, painful, and necessary birth of a better way forward. 18 months had passed since the incident on Flight 284. To the world, the story had a perfect, satisfying ending. Transatlantic Airways, under the watchful eye of Dr. Evelyn Reed's imposed oversight, had become a poster child for corporate reform. Their stock had rebounded and even surpassed its previous highs with their new marketing campaign centered around the themes of diversity and respect. Evelyn Reed herself had been lauded as a new kind of activist CEO, a woman who wielded her corporate power not just for profit, but for progress. Etheria Innovations had become synonymous with ethical technology, attracting the best and brightest talent. Tonight, Evelyn stood at a podium in a glittering San Francisco ballroom, the weight of a heavy glass award in her hands. She was accepting the Bay Area Business Council's award for Ethical Leader of the Year. In her speech, she spoke of accountability, of the responsibility that comes with power, and of building a future where dignity isn't a luxury. The applause was thunderous. People saw her as an icon, a titan of industry with an unshakable moral compass. They didn't see the woman who late at night sometimes reread the vicious, hate-filled messages she still occasionally received. They didn't know about the new security detail she had to hire. They didn't understand the profound loneliness of being a symbol. Later that week, back in her office, an email slipped through the meticulous filters set up by her executive assistant. The subject line was simple and chilling: Brenda Miller. Evelyn's first instinct was to delete it. She had closed that chapter. But a morbid curiosity, a sense of unfinished business, made her click it open. It was not from a journalist or a troll. It was from a young woman named Chloe Miller, Brenda's daughter. The email was not what she expected. It wasn't angry or accusatory, not in the way the trolls were. It was something far more unsettling, a portrait of quiet, complete devastation. "Dear Dr. Reed," it began, "I'm not writing to you to defend what my mother did. It was wrong, racist, ugly, and inexcusable. I saw the video. I was as horrified as everyone else. I am not asking for your pity or your forgiveness for her actions. I'm writing to you because I feel like someone has to tell you what happens after the world moves on to the next viral story. You didn't just get my mother fired. You erased her. She lost her pension after a protracted legal battle with the airline, which used a morality clause in her contract. We lost our house. Her friends, the ones she flew with for 2 decades, stopped speaking to her overnight. She can't get a job anywhere in the service industry because her name is now infamous. The internet never forgets. Last year, she was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. The medical bills are overwhelming. She now works night stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store for minimum wage. She's 57 years old, her back hurts, and she's invisible. People walk past her in the aisles, never knowing she's the monster from the news. Most days she doesn't speak to a single person. Her spark, even the bitter, angry spark she had, is gone. There is nothing left but shame. I know you are celebrated for what you did. You forced a massive company to be better, and I believe that is a good thing. But I have to ask you, as I sit here listening to my mother weep in her sleep in the next room, was it worth it to fix the system? You had to utterly destroy a human being. I hope for your sake that you never have to see the cost of your victory up close. It's a ghost that will follow you forever." The email ended there. No requests and no demands, just a quiet, devastating account of a life in ruins. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. She read it again, and then a third time. She had thought of Brenda Miller as an antagonist, a villain in a story who received her just desserts. She had never truly considered the wreckage left behind after the karma had been delivered. She had fought a symbol of prejudice, and in doing so, had created a ghost. She forwarded the email to Marcus without comment. He appeared in her office doorway. A few minutes later, his face set like stone. "Delete it, Evelyn," he said, his voice firm. "This is not your problem. This is a classic manipulation tactic. She's trying to make you feel guilty for doing the right thing." "Is she?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Or is she just telling the truth?" "Read it, Marcus. There's no anger in it. Just grief. Every action has a consequence." Marcus argued, his pragmatism a shield against the raw emotion of the letter. Brenda Miller made her choices. She built her own prison of bitterness and prejudice long before you ever stepped on that plane. You didn't destroy her. You just held up a mirror. What she saw shattered her. That is on her, not you. Logically, she knew he was right, but logic offered little comfort. The phrase, "the cost of your victory," had burrowed into her mind. She thought of the scholarships her foundation was now funding, the new diverse faces in transatlantic uniforms, the tangible positive change, and now she had to weigh that against the image of a broken 57-year-old woman stocking shelves in the dead of night, haunted by her own failure. For days, the dilemma consumed her. To respond felt like an admission of guilt. To ignore it felt monstrous. This was the messy, untold part of the story, the part that didn't fit into a triumphant news cycle. Finally, she made a decision. She wasn't responsible for Brenda Miller's happiness, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being connected to her suffering. She called the director of her charitable foundation. "I have a delicate project for you," Evelyn said, her voice low. "It requires absolute anonymity. I'm going to give you a name. I want you to find out this person's outstanding medical debts and pay them off. all of them. And then I want you to set up a modest educational trust for her daughter Chloe. Nothing extravagant, just enough to ease the burden. The source of the funds is to be listed simply as an anonymous benefactor. No one, especially not the family, can ever know it came from me or this foundation. Is that understood? It was not forgiveness. It was not an apology. It was a quiet acknowledgement of a shared, if unwelcome, humanity. An attempt to treat a wound without condoning the action that caused it. It was the only way Evelyn could reconcile the celebrated hero she was in public with the conflicted woman the daughter's letter had revealed to her. She was writing a balance not of justice, but of consequence. And as she hung up the phone, she realized the truth. The karma for Flight 284 hadn't ended with Brenda's firing. It was still rippling outwards, a complex, unending wave, and a small part of its price would always be hers to pay. The story of Dr. Evelyn Reed and Brenda Miller is a powerful reminder that our actions, even the smallest ones, a laugh, a word, a snap judgment, can have life-altering consequences. It shows us that prejudice isn't just an abstract concept. It carries a real and devastating cost, not just for individuals, but for massive corporations. But more than that, it's a story about the incredible power one person can have when they refuse to be diminished, and instead use a moment of injustice to demand systemic change. Evelyn didn't just want an apology. She wanted accountability, and she used her power to create a lasting impact that would benefit thousands. What did you think of the hard karma Brenda received? Was it deserved? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a situation like this? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. If this story resonated with you, please smash that like button, share it with your friends, and make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have many more stories about justice karma and the power of standing up for what's right. Join our community and be part of the conversation.